Hello and welcome to IoT World Today. I'm Lauren Horwitz, Senior Content Director. And in the following discussion, we're going to talk with a couple of experts about some of the keys to successfully selling IoT in the enterprise today. So first, let's talk a little bit about the state of the market. The number of devices connected to the internet, including machines, sensors, and cameras that make up the Internet of Things, continues to grow at a steady pace. A forecast from IDC estimates that there will be 41.6 billion connected IoT devices or things, generating 79.4 zettabytes of data by 2025. And according to a recent survey that we did on IoT World Today, more than 50% of about 500 respondents said that COVID-19 has only heightened the need for digital initiatives, including IoT projects. But the truth is that many on the sales side need to better understand the markets and the practitioners that they're selling to. So now I want to turn to some experts and some practitioners to talk about how to understand these technologies and what some of the strategies are for selling IoT in the enterprise and some best practices. So now I'd like to welcome a couple folks. Steve Brummer of BH IoT Group, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me.
And Bill Clayman of Switch and a longtime collaborator with me. Bill, welcome.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you guys. So now I'm going to start with sort of just a baseline question. A lot of people advise kind of starting incrementally and kind of working slowly to get your enterprise kind of warmed up to the idea of selling IoT. Can you guys talk a little bit about some approaches to kind of getting the enterprise ready and getting them to understand some of the challenges in selling IoT? Steve, let's start with you.
Well, the biggest thing is education. I've been touting that for at least the last 5 years of the 27 years I've been in machine-to-machine and IoT. We are still doing a very horrible job of educating, whether it be the customers, the end users, or the resellers, or the dealers, or the distributors, let alone the enterprises. It's easy to say I'm in IoT, but what does that really mean? What part of it? This stuff is still hard. There's so many components to a successful solution from end to end. And so the concept of it is knowing the difference between, what does an edge computer and edge computing in the IoT space mean? Then what are these sensors and what networks? And are we, doing LoRa? Are we doing, cellular, all these things on the cloud? Which one's the right platform? So it is about educating and making it, and I believe the KISS theory has to stay in focus for some of the people that are out there trying to sell this stuff. We spend an absorbent amount of time on the channels, so trying to get the channel partners and the resellers to get into this business. You'd be surprised that there's not a lot of them in it. They want to be in it, even though every channel magazine known to mankind pontificates about the idea that, IoT is very important to them. They're not pushing as many numbers. So I think it's about educating and making sure they understand, what lane they should stay in and not make this thing difficult.
Now, Bill, I'm going to ask you the same, but sort of cast it in a slightly different light, given your experience. Mm-hmm. So in the times that we've talked about some of the challenges, you've talked quite a bit about this notion of understanding the language of different verticals, different enterprises, and in order to kind of persuasively sell. Does that give you a good launch pad to talk about what you think is important here?
Yes. And you believe me, I think any kind of launch pad is going to work for me. So this is really, really important and heartfelt. Remarkably, if we were doing this conversation just a year ago, I think my answer would be fundamentally different, maybe just more high level, abstract, go learn something. Steve brought up some really good points. Education is absolutely critical, but if today is not evidence enough of what it means to be a connected society and a society that really relies on these systems as not just cool things that we work with every single day, but actually life-saving components in some situations, that's something really important to understand. So Lauren, learning the language of a vertical or two, let's look at healthcare for just a second. Healthcare. Those requirements around IoT, connected devices, whatever the case might be, are much more prevalent where we're having these conversations than ever before. It could be everything from telehealth, telemedicine, the app segment. All of those industry segments right now are being heavily invested to because people aren't going into the office anymore, right? An aging population that can't go in the office any longer now needs to use connected devices to be able to access those doctors, get different kinds of medical care. We're lighting up remote facilities. So the conversation becomes, what are you deploying? How are you deploying it? And this is the next really important part when we talk about learning the language of a vertical or two. There's future proof, and then there's burnout proof technologies. When you work with IoT, the last thing you ever want to do is dangle that shiny carrot, have a customer jump on it, have no idea what to do with it. It's just there. And it doesn't make your life easier, regardless of how cool this thing might be. So now all of a sudden we have to understand, just because it's cool, does it bring us value? The other extent is in the mechanics, the actual details of your device. Healthcare, again, this thing that I'm deploying, is it going to be processing data? Is it a transient device? Where are the components made? Are they made somewhere where maybe I can't authorize the purchase of this device? Or are they made locally here in the United States that I know if the data is being stored, it's geofenced and not being sent into the cloud anywhere? So the language of the business becomes the language of the device itself. The biggest challenge that I've come over, that I've been helping customers go over, this over the fence at least, is this notion of understanding what to do with this device, the components of it, and making sure it's not just this cool dangling shiny carrot that people are chasing. Again, it's technologies that don't stress you out, that do give you value effectively. So never ever try and position a device, the same device, to different markets in the same way. They're going to interpret and make it contextualize. Really, really important to understand that.
Now, Steve, I hope this will be a fair question for you and something that you can talk about, but can you talk about how some of the channel partners are having some early wins with their customers? What kind of strategies are they using? What do they look like? I know we talked with one channel partner in a previous incarnation of this conversation about sort of upsell, looking at his customer base, verticalizing, and then upselling to some existing customers as one really important strategy he was using. I'll throw it to you for some others that you think are important for partners to get involved.
I guess it depends on the partner, but the answer to that would be yes. I love that answer, because if you are an IT reseller, you're in the IT business, you've been selling 365 licenses, you understand what Azure's all about, then it's very easy to kind of add on top of what you currently sell in the specific vertical markets you go after, a IoT solution. Today it's never been easier today, even though it's still hard, it's never been easier today to find solutions and sensors and products and networks to be able to offer any vertical market whatever they're looking for, whatever problem we want to solve using an IoT. So traditional IT VARs are well entrenched into trying to figure out, because they understand managed services. So if you really look at the IoT side of that, very similar to what IT does in general. If you look at some of the telecom guys, so what I say, telecom guys that are selling UCaaS and those types of voice services, those guys are having a harder time getting into IoT. They always have, even going back, and I'm going to date myself, going back to the early BlackBerry days when we were the largest stocking distributor in the United States for BlackBerries. We had a hard time getting into them then because they were stuck in their ways. You know, they're box guys. They got to sell a Mitel box and a Panasonic box, and it was very difficult. And so I think it's still difficult for them to grasp the idea of what a wireless solution can do for them, let alone IoT. So it really depends on the VAR and the segment of the marketplaces they go after. But like if you're in oil and gas, as in Bill said, the healthcare industry, and you've been selling it to hospitals and rural hospitals and nursing homes and any of those kinds of facilities, oh my God, you can make a fortune selling IoT into those exact same places. And so a lot of those VARs that have that experience are looking to IoT to say, okay, well, I'm just doing basic asset management inside a hospital, like Bill said, with a sensor. This is the product. I think Bill is right on as far as what he said about the data. This business is all about the data and the information that you're getting out. And the average VAR out there has no idea what to do with that data. They're not going to hire any data scientists to analyze that data. So it's about trying to find whatever that dashboard data can look like for that vertical market group. That's what they have to do. Whether it's just monitoring, which is a majority of the dashboards right now in vertical markets are around monitoring. I know where my asset is. I know where my truck is. I don't need to know what's in the going through an ODB unit. I don't need to know all that stuff. But tell me what else I can get out of that data. So I think vertical market segmentations is extremely important to these people, regardless of the vertical that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Bill, since we've been talking about the value of the data, let's talk a little bit about architecture. I'm going to ask you both a little bit about that, but I know this is a hot topic for you. So I'm going to start by, we've been covering this on the site quite a bit, really thinking about your data models, particularly as the edge becomes more important and you don't always want to rely on the cloud. A lot of these processes are real time. Mm-hmm. You don't want to send data to the cloud back and forth. It takes too long. It's expensive, security risks. Let's talk a little bit about architecture and maybe some data models that people have to consider now. Or have I just covered it?
No. I think it's an important point to just kind of talk about data flow, right? Whatever you're trying to deploy within your architecture, you have to understand how data is being worked with. I really want to make sure everyone understands this. If you're putting an IoT device in your ecosystem on an active network, do not think of it as just a traditional laptop, a PC, a machine. It's different. And it's got different threat and attack vectors as well. I don't want to, this is not a conversation on fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but please understand that malicious actors aren't, there aren't scarce targets out there. There's plenty for them to go after. So the last thing you want to do is an unmanaged IP range, unmanaged MAC addresses, unmanaged devices that you lose, for example. 85% of breaches that happened last year were against systems where patches were available, where they were, especially on connected devices where they just weren't monitored, for example, they just get lost. So when we start to talk about data flow and data aggregation and ingestion and understanding what's happening out there, these aren't benign devices, okay? There's smarter devices. Now there's even conversations around things like mist computing, the edge of the edge, now we're calling it. And where these devices themselves are doing microprocessing at the furthest reaches of the edge and then sending it to other edge machines and then obviously out to the cloud. Data flow is critical and it's not ubiquitous. It's going to be different between different kinds of situations and solutions. So you need to know where this information is flowing and how you can ingest it to make better decisions around your architecture. These pieces of information can be tied in with data analytics, cognitive systems, where you can do things like AI, pattern recognition. Listen, almost all these kinds of systems are now deploying their own architectures. If I'm not mistaken, Cisco Meraki recently released a new line of sensors, brand new, right? We're talking about a technology company that does access points and network switches and all that stuff. Now all of a sudden it has temperature sensors, motion sensors you can put in a data center that connect with a core Meraki environment. Talk about data flow for a second there. In integration with network, storage, compute, as well as these sensors devices that are now monitoring your ecosystem. If they're segmented, if they're fragmented, how do you know where the data is flowing, where this information is actually going through? Remember, there's a difference between IT and OT, right? Information technology and operation technology, where IT, in short, deals with information and OT deals with machines, where the former manages sort of the flow of digital information, while the latter manages the operation of physical processes and the machinery that uses them to carry it out. So you have to understand where these two fit in and how they can join IT and OT. Data flow is critical. It's something that needs to be in the architectural process of when you design it. Create VLANs, segment your networks, segment your data flow for connected devices. Don't just arbitrarily put them on active networks. These are separate pieces of your environment.
So Steve, I'm going to ask you another spin on this question. I want to talk a little bit about regulation, compliance, how you educate your partners and folks about verticals, their regulatory requirements, standards and the lack thereof, quite frankly. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I'm glad you said on the vertical markets, because if you ask me about standards around IoT, I would say, tell me what they are, Lauren. I would like to know. It's the same adage, and I know, Bill, you feel the same way about security. What is our standard, in the IoT security world? Oh, I don't. It's encryption. Don't worry about it. So that's as far as I'm going on the IoT side. But in a vertical market, it's extremely important. So when we talk about regulations as it relates to smart housing or smart buildings or smart communities, trying to just muddle through all the requirements that are around that, trying to make sure that what we're putting in fits the handicap and ADA regulations for a smart home or a smart building or condo or apartment. That's just in that construction vertical market that's in there. When we get into transportation and the logistics parts of that, how much is ELD going to work as far as related? I can track my truck, but what am I doing as it relates to driver logs and the integration? And if I have a smart engine module that's looking at things, what's that vertical market looking like? And does it fit and pass all the DOT regulations? Public safety. I mean, we're looking at facial recognition. It's a privacy issue. We're looking at gunshot sensors. Oh, you can't put that on our telephone poles. That's against violation of privacy. So you are running aground with all these types of regulations, which has changed the need for you to understand how important it is to be in the vertical markets that you really, really go deep into, and be able to understand all those regulations and all the trials and tribulations associated with it. And it's across any vertical that we're playing with.
Now, Bill, in another incarnation of this conversation, we had some folks who talked a lot about kind of not going it alone, not trying to just advise on your own, but really enlisting a team, but also you as an example, sort of being the trusted advisor piece. Kind of connecting you with the other partners, with the enterprise. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic as partners and as enterprises think about kind of building a team to deploy IoT?
So I've been in the channel. I've been lucky enough to be in the channel for over 10 years now, through different roles and different capacities. And I've had a chance to work with physical devices and IoT. I can't stress this enough to everybody listening. Becoming a trusted advisor is so much more than selling a physical piece of technology, right? You really are helping an organization see the bigger picture, and then they're going to keep coming back to you because you help them see that bigger picture. Connected devices are a new, but also not such a new realm. When you deploy them into any sort of customer base, it's so critical to sit down with their engineers, their management, middle management, and executive teams to get buy-in from everybody. Becoming a trusted advisor helps you obviously gain a better foothold with the organization, but also help them utilize those devices so much better. Imagine if I use this phone only for making phone calls. So my Sprint store, or whoever, insert your name, store, sold this to me and said, this can make phone calls, but didn't tell me about anything else, right? Imagine how much of a loss of functionality that I have around this device because, well, it makes great phone calls. I had no idea I could take pictures of my cat or anything else, right? There's elements that are in there. And, talking about logistics, for example, Steve, you brought in a really cool example. I attended a Cisco conference a little while back where they talked about how they lit up garbage trucks, essentially recycling trucks, all of them. And they were able to, logistics is a great example. We're able to monitor where they were on the map and also see how full their bins were. So if one truck was completely full, they would reroute them back, and another truck in a nearby area would go pick up that recycling and then keep going along its way. And it was all done intelligently, and all of it was done very, very smart as well. So, when we talk about how we can become trusted advisors, it's that compliance conversation, it's that security conversation, it's that deployment and use case conversation. It's making sure that your customers are using the full breadth of these technologies. Oftentimes, when I was working with Citrix and VMware and other, insert your company name here, customers would buy a piece of technology and not realize that there were 50% functions and features they already paid for, they weren't using, right? So you have to come in there, and these devices are so extraordinarily versatile that there's use cases that you just need to sit down. Obviously, I know you can't maybe have a face-to-face conversation anymore, but go on Zoom, insert your favorite or your communications platform here, and tell them, did you know that these devices can do X? They can do Bluetooth beaconing. So all of a sudden, they're not just here to turn your lights on and off. They can actually help you utilize space more effectively, tie in with your HVAC system, and turn off your air conditioning when there is no one in the room. Whoa, whoa, whoa. My little sensor can do that? Yeah, it can. It can actually integrate with building management systems and do all this. Mind gets blown, customer gets excited, and all of a sudden you're a trusted advisor because you know the full capabilities of these solutions. I think that's awesome.
I agree.
And Lauren, I want to address two things real quick. So, Bill, the one thing we're missing on the garbage truck scenario is we can talk about it at a later time, but ROI, because it sounds good but feels bad. A lot of those guys are not breaking even on that investment where they thought they were going to reduce the amount of trucks or drivers to do those things. And so as a trusted advisor, when you're selling return on your investment, it's really good to follow that rule. But when it's all said and done, you have to look at what you just said. That garbage bin can be used for so many other needs within those cities. For example, one of the V2X technology use cases are by putting things in garbage cans and dumpsters and putting sensors in there for autonomous vehicles, because they are strategically located trash bins on corners of cities. So you're right. I mean, but as a trusted advisor, we say this all the time. Today, I was with a satellite company that's looking to engage us as an IoT insider to be advising them on a variety of things from consumer to enterprise needs and their own internal needs. They're looking to engage our firm because we have the ability to look at different aspects of their business and seeing and understanding how IoT can affect those aspects of the business while making it cost effective and having some kind of sense of ROI. What's in it for them? What's the monetization and commercialization needs? What's that journey look like for their customers? It's so many times we forget about the buyer journey. Who's the buyer? How do they want to buy it? Where do they want to buy it? How do they want to pay for it? Those are all part of being a trusted advisor for our clients.
Yep. And just circling back to what we talked about earlier, Steve, I think you bring up such an important point that I still get excited about the coolness of IoT, right? I do. In case you can't tell with the energy.
Well, how do you think I feel after 27 years of doing this? And machine to machine, Bill, you were a baby. It was a machine to machine 27 years ago.
That's very, very true. I wasn't even in this country yet. But I agree with you, right? We get so excited about that cool, shiny, dangling carrot, but that we forget to ask them those important questions. Well, what is the functionality? What does this cost me? What is the ROI here in the near future? I think that's a really, really important point for us to take a step back and like we were talking about earlier, instead of just, future proof versus burnout proof and technologies that actually bring value to the business.
So finally, I want to ask you guys individually, and Bill, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Steve. What's a key takeaway for people listening on how to kind of successfully sell and deploy? What's a key strategy that you want to leave them with?
Services. Please don't forget about services. And if you're an organization that only sells hardware, cool, partner with somebody who does services, because I can't tell you how critical that is to come into an organization and don't sell devices, sell architectures, okay? And sell visions, sell strategies. Your hardware is going to be a part of that. But that bigger and broader conversation is so much more important to have. Too much and too often we create these tunnel visions, right? Where we just can't support what we're doing every single day. And a lot of times we get that engineering mindset. And I mean, I get at fault of that, just by getting too excited about it. But selling services on top of these kinds of architectures is going to be so important, where you test and build and iterate and broaden out into other additional projects. Time and time again, I've found success in the channel with connected devices and so on, is when You simply check in with the customer. Hey, are you using these features? Are you using these functions? You paid for them. Even 6 months after we had sold a project, for example, you dial back in and say, hey, are you using this new function that came out? Well, no, we're not. Well, hang on, so you paid for it. You have it. I think it'd be really cool in this department. Do you want to give it a try? There's no more hardware sales. Now it's just send out a couple of engineers and be that value-driven partner. I think that's a really important takeaway. We focus too much on the device and then forget some of the surrounding things around it.
Mm-hmm. Steve.
So last month at this thing called the IoT World, I did a keynote on how to make money in IoT.
Yes.
And part of the topics that I was bringing up was, there are so many areas to make money in along that value chain, from the sensor to the gateways to the edge boxes in the cloud, just on and on and on. But it's very important that you stay within your capabilities lane. Don't stray outside of it. It's ridiculous how many times I've been in there going to a company to try and repair the damage done by someone that overpromised and underdelivered because they went outside of their swim lanes. Stay within your comfort zones. Make sure you are listening to the customer. Find out their problem and make sure you solve the problem with the products that we have. It's basic 101 sales, but it's also, as Bill said, the money long-term, the recurring revenue stream that everybody is looking for is on services, nothing else, whether it's managed services on the data or you're handling the activations, whether you're doing the maintenance, whether you're doing software upgrades and OTA, what are you doing? But, I think long-term, a little bit longer term, when we get into some situations where the data analytics and the AI ML part of IoT is, it's not, Bill, I'm not going, it's in a box, but I'm going to say that it's available in the cloud for you to upload data from these various things and be able to display it on a dashboard for a customer and for a VAR dealer SI to easily see it and pontificate. Then we've changed the services industry in a big way around IoT. And I can't wait for that day, which I think is coming sooner than later, if my client can get it done.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And lastly, I'll just say, as far as this year, which has been a strange journey for all of us, do you think it has, I started out with that data talking about sort of the highlighting the imperative for a lot of enterprises to digitize. Has that been your sense as you work with customers, that it's kind of highlighted the imperatives for IoT projects?
I don't think it's changed it that much. I still think that everybody is, knows that they have to do that. I think the fallout of the last 7-8 months has been the idea that everybody now has a COVID-19 IoT solution from, to be used, and no one's really deploying them in the volume that they originally had thought was going to happen. But I think that's an interesting play. You know what? The COVID-19 scenario has been an extremely great learning tool for everybody, because they're trying to figure out, the contact tracing and the temperature sensing and all the other things related to COVID. It's an interesting thing that has happened out of a bad thing. And I think that's what IoT is all about. What is the problem? How can IoT solve it? And so I think that that's been a really cool byproduct of the craziness that we've been living through.
So I got to challenge that a little bit. I've seen, I'm sorry, Steve, got to do it. You can't have a webinar with a little bit of an argument. I think from what I've seen, at least, this whole these words about digitizing and innovation, where they used to be these cool, awesome marketing-y words and things that we would throw around a lot.
Digital transformation, Bill?
Yeah, that one. Don't make me say it. I really think that those terms have become, less about marketing and much more about survival. And that's something that I've certainly noticed, is those organizations that actually have legitimately stopped using them as words and have implemented different systems, whether it's IoT or virtualization or cloud or whatever, using partners and good channel support are the ones that have been able to simply survive or more effectively survive. These kinds of IoT technologies, I mean, they're built around, this concept of empowering people. And from what I've seen is that those organizations that have leveraged good partners to adopt some of these new solutions. And again, it's super contextual, to you what a digital transformation looks like, those organizations have been more effectively capable of surviving this space. I've seen it across the board. Everything from like Dick's Sporting Goods, who created and implemented a better web platform and a better connectivity architecture to support their business and their sales, to to a few restaurants that did a better job improving the way they were able to reach out to people and get more people to connect and buy from them. I think it's a little bit more of a dire term, digitization, digital transformation, where it's focused more on the survival of an organization. I think people need to be focusing on that. And again, you don't need to be on that journey alone. That's the important point.
But I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I think digital initiatives have become really infrastructure, right? And daily operations, not just marketing.
There's a saying I want everyone to listen to. And this is something that's been hilarious. Congratulations, you've just achieved your 5-year IT plan in 6 months. That's what everyone is going through right now.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I can't thank you guys enough for joining me today. I hope we'll get the chance to meet again soon and talk a little bit more about some of these things, and maybe some other topics we didn't get to today. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, definitely.
So, and for everybody watching, for more on IoT, you can always check out IoT World today. And thanks again for my guests today, Steve Brummer and Bill Clayman, for joining us and talking about IoT. And until next time.